Welcome! Today we're diving into what might be one of the most specific and frankly startling prophecies ever written. We're just looking at 3 verses from the ancient book of Isaiah, chapter 53, verses 7 through 9. But in this short passage, we get this incredibly detailed picture of a figure who faces suffering with total silence and complete innocence. So let's break down what makes these words so powerful.
Right off the bat, the prophecy hits us with this really haunting image of silent submission. This person is being oppressed, they're afflicted, it looks like they're in some kind of formal trial, but his response? Nothing. Complete silence. He doesn't offer a defense, he doesn't protest. It's a very deliberate choice to stay quiet, even when everything is on the line.
And that's what verse 7 is all about. It introduces this central image, this silent lamb. You know, the prophecy doesn't just mention this silence once. It really hammers the point home, repeating the idea to make sure we get just how important this is.
Okay, so this one phrase is the absolute heart of verse 7. Here you have a figure who has every right, every reason to speak out and defend himself, but he chooses not to, and this specific detail sets up a fascinating and very direct connection to events described hundreds of years later.
And this is where things get really interesting. According to the New Testament, this prophecy is seen as having a dramatic fulfillment. When Jesus is brought before the high priest Caiaphas and they're bringing up all these false witnesses, he says nothing. You can almost hear the high priest's frustration in that question, "Answerest thou nothing?"
And it wasn't a one-off thing. It happened again. When he was sent to Herod, who apparently threw a ton of questions at him, the response was exactly the same: silence. So this wasn't just a momentary choice, it was a consistent response to all of his accusers.
Which of course brings up a huge question. Why? I mean, why wouldn't you defend yourself when your life is on the line? Well, the source material points to a few really profound reasons. So this silence wasn't just him being passive. According to these texts, it was packed with meaning. First, it's presented as the direct fulfillment of Isaiah's words. What was written is now happening. Second, it was a powerful way to show his innocence. It's like he was refusing to even dignify the false accusations with a response. And third, it showed he was willingly submitting to a much bigger plan, fully embracing that role of the sacrificial lamb. Now, as you can imagine, this silence leads directly to a pretty grim outcome. As the prophecy moves into verse 8, the scene shifts from an unjust trial to a fatal judgment. It describes the figure as being cut off from the living.
Wow, the language here is just so stark, isn't it? Taken from judgment and cut off out of the land of the living. This isn't talking about a peaceful death in old age. This is describing something else entirely.
And you have to understand, in the ancient world, this phrase was unmistakable. It meant a violent, premature end. It meant being totally severed from life, from your community, from everything. And the verse even gives a reason, not for something he did, but for the transgression of my people. And this is seen as connecting directly to the moment described in the Gospel of John. His life ends with those words, "It is finished." In the language of Isaiah's prophecy, he is cut off from the land of the living, having completed the mission he came to do.
Okay, but the story isn't over. It takes another really surprising turn in verse 9. We've seen the silent submission and the unjust death, but next, Isaiah prophesies a very specific and what seems like a totally contradictory burial.
Now this verse presents a fascinating puzzle. How can someone have a grave with both the wicked and the rich? I mean, those two things seem to completely cancel each other out. But the way the sources interpret this is incredibly precise. Here's how it's understood. With the wicked refers to the condition of his death. He was executed like a criminal, right alongside 2 thieves. But with the rich refers to his actual literal burial. After he died, a wealthy, respected man named Joseph of Arimathea placed his body in his own new tomb. So, just like that, the prophecy is seen as being fulfilled in 2 totally distinct but accurate ways.
And you know, right after laying out this incredible paradox about his grave, the verse gives us the reason why all of this happened to him. And it's emphatic. It wasn't for anything he did. The text makes his complete innocence crystal clear.
So, the first proof of his innocence is this powerful statement, he had done no violence. And this means more than just that he wasn't a murderer. It suggests his entire character was one of non-violence.
And there's really no better example of this than at his arrest. I mean, think about it. When one of his own followers draws a sword and attacks a servant of the high priest, Jesus immediately shuts down the violence and then miraculously heals the very man who came to take him away. That is the definition of doing no violence.
And the second proof of his innocence? Just as powerful. Complete and total honesty. No lies, no manipulation, no deceit could be found in him at all.
And this is what I find so amazing. This point gets reinforced in the Gospel accounts. The sources point out that his enemies were so desperate to find a charge that would stick that they had to actively search for false witnesses, and even then, their stories fell apart. They simply could not find a single legitimate fault in him.
So let's just step back for a second. In just 3 short verses, Isaiah lays out this entire incredible story. It starts with a silent, willing submission to his accusers. It moves to an unjust execution, and it ends with this paradoxical burial that just highlights his complete and total innocence.
And that brings us to our final thought, the one massive question this all leads to. The text goes out of its way to tell us this person was completely faultless. So if his suffering and death weren't a punishment for his own actions, what does this ancient prophecy suggest was the ultimate reason he was stricken for the transgression of my people? That's really the central mystery and the powerful message of this passage.